grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm one of your hosts, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating, not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised.
In the last episode, we spoke to Rachel and Richard, a biological father and daughter who connected in 2017 using Jigsaw's Forced Adoption Support Services Intermediary service. Today, Jane Sleeker and I will be further discussing the Intermediary service and how it works. Hi, Jane. How's it going?
Hey, Jo. Not bad at all.
That's good. How about you traveling? Well, I'm doing all right again. I'm doing all right. And I apologise if my dog barks. He's been barking all afternoon, harassing people.
That is all right. I've closed my balcony doors so we don't hear any birds. But anyway, good. It's kind of nice. Things are easing a tiny bit. I feel like every time we talk is like a new development with social distancing.
It's like we're getting paroled bit by bit, isn't it?
Yes.
I went for a drive to Toowoomba.
Oh, that's cool. Was that on the weekend?
Yeah, I did. I took my mother down to visit some relatives down there that she hasn't seen for a while, and she actually cried when she got down there. So I think she's really been suffering under the isolation. So
that's really sweet. I went for a drive on the weekend too. Actually, had lunch with my birth family. So
beautiful.
It's nice to just get out of the city a little bit and drive.
It is
150 k's. I think that's still the limit.
So much stuff we used to take for granted that now is a really big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
So getting into today's episode, Jane, we heard from Rachel that when she got in touch with Jigsaw, she already had some details and she knew that she wanted help finding her father. Is that a typical experience?
Well, it'd be nice if I had a stat for this, but I don't. Some people do have their father's details when they contact us. That might come from the official adoption records that they've received, or it might be a name that the mother has given to them or a family member of the mother. Some people don't know anything at all, though, and they're sort of hoping for us to be able to help them to discuss how they might be able to find that out.
Yeah.
I guess more and more now, some people are actually having success through things like ancestry DNA. So we're definitely not experts in that, but we're learning more and more all the time because it's just becoming
It's a game changer, isn't it?
It's a massive game changer. Yeah. It's some people have a lot of success, and even the people who don't have success in actually, I guess, identifying who their father is still get clues or contact with some family members, and it's not that difficult to isolate what might be the mother's side and the father's side. And the other thing is, new people are doing the tests all the time. People tend to get them as Christmas presents, so people who have done them, we encourage them to maybe get on there every couple of months and just see if they've got new matches. But anyway,
that's a really good tip, because I've given two of them as Christmas presents, but I also did one myself, and it actually led me into contact with two first cousins of my birth mothers, and we've been in contact, and it's opened up a whole side of my family that I didn't know much about. So
that's great. It's pretty exciting stuff, actually.
It is.
Yeah, as long as, I mean, that's probably another episode, to be honest. Obviously, you know, anyone's got to approach some of those contacts very sensitively, because, particularly, I guess, if you haven't already established contact with a direct biological parent. Because people like, I guess, to be contacted directly, and it can potentially undermine that relationship, or just bring up some feelings if they think, oh my goodness, my child's had contact with my cousin or whoever.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas in your case, you've known your mother for years, so it's a bit
Yes.
different.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
But I guess I'll try to get back on the intermediary thing because we could talk all day. But yeah, that's probably another topic we might actually want to get into a lot more detail about it.
I'll make a note.
Yeah, make a note. So I guess back on the DNA, well, not the DNA, back on the intermediary. Often people have a name, sometimes they don't. So yeah, if they don't, we might refer them to the relevant state department to try to see if there is some details, or they might have it from a family member, or yeah, we might help them very sensitively to understand, I guess, some of those DNA results, if that's an option. So I guess at that point, sometimes if the person is looking for a mother, Rachel's episode obviously was about a father, but if they're looking for a mother, or if it's a mother looking, or a mother or a father looking for a female child, if someone has married, obviously the name might have changed. So sometimes there's an additional step where they'll then need to apply to births, deaths and marriages.
Yes, yeah. It can get a bit tricky sometimes, can't it?
Yeah. And I guess when people ring us, we do try to help them navigate, the next step, because you kind of need to apply for your adoption information first, and then potentially births, deaths and marriages. And then we can help people to locate the person. People can do that themselves, but sometimes they want our help with that. So as Rachel mentioned in her episode, one of the most common avenues we use is the electoral roll, because it is a public document, and the government department that releases the adoption information actually mentions that as one avenue. So often, because you have to physically go into the office, that can be a bit tricky if someone lives in the country. So we might do that on their behalf. And during COVID-19 times, I'll just say the electoral roll's closed. So that's holding up some of our searches at the moment. Yeah.
That would be really frustrating.
It is. Some people are having to wait, which sucks. Yeah. So I'm just thinking if I've sort of covered everything there. Well, some people at that point, we explain, I suppose, that we do offer an intermediary service, and some people are very happy and want to make their own direct contact, and that's absolutely fine. And we would then offer, if they would like some support with that. Sometimes people want to kind of write their own letter and then get some feedback on that. Or sometimes, they want to make that direct contact but then debrief with us. So that's absolutely fine. We really are about empowering people, because a lot of people, when it came to the adoption itself, there wasn't a lot of control or choice. So we really want them to be informed of all their options, but to make their own mind up about how they want to do things.
Yeah, definitely.
And but yeah, a lot of people do choose that they would like us to make that first contact as the intermediary, and and we do in that process then still try to keep them as informed as possible, like every step of the way, so that they're involved in that process.
Jane, I wanted to take you back into just DNA testing for a moment. We heard that in Rachel's very first contact with Jigsaw, DNA testing was discussed. Why is that?
Well, probably because Rachel was very upfront that she was looking for her father at that point, and she'd already located her mother. We do recommend anyone looking to contact a father, or a father trying to contact a child, we now highlight the recommendation that it's probably quite sensible to conduct a DNA test quite early in the process. The reason for this is that even when there's very clear information in the adoption records about who the father is, or the mother has a very clear memory, even in cases where people have been certain, there have been a handful of cases over the years that we've experienced when people have built a relationship, fathers and the child have built a relationship, and then thought they were very certain, and even thought they could see some physical resemblance, and then in one way or another down the track found out he wasn't the father. So it's not a judgment call, it's not sort of anything negative. We're just, I guess, saying to people, look, if you just want that peace of mind, it's better to do that early. And then everyone can relax a bit and everyone can build that relationship with that basis and that kind of certainty. Yeah. And it might also be that we found the wrong guy that has the same name, you know, and it can be that as well. So it's just peace of mind. And actually that's what the DNA test people often use, which is through a lab, are actually called peace of mind DNA tests.
Okay.
Which are different and cheaper than some legally binding ones that people might use for other things. So some people use DNA tests, obviously, when the child's young to establish paternity, and that's got implications for custody and child support. But this has got no legal ramifications. It's not actually a legal standing, but scientifically it's enough to be pretty certain, very certain, and to give that peace of mind that those two people are definitely father and child.
Jen, I'm just remembering, so I used an intermediary service when I met my mother when I was 19, and it was really just to write a letter, which I'm sure we'll get into soon, some of the things that you do. But when I met my father when I was 39, I didn't use the intermediary service. And when it came to thinking about a DNA test, this is going to sound weird because I'm an adult, but I actually felt it was almost rude to ask, and I was worried it would scare him off if I asked him to do it. And that was just my own things going through my head. So I imagine that using an intermediary would take some of that, I guess it would take some of that fraughtness about asking the question out of it. So are you often involved in facilitating the DNA test?
Yes. Well, I guess we're involved in so much as if we're already involved as an intermediary, then it usually is quite a natural conversation. And I guess the reason that it's natural is because we talk about it in the terms, like what I've just kind of, the types of things I just said. We just talk about it as it's really for the benefit of both parties to have that certainty before they invest a lot of emotion in getting to know someone. And I guess because it's us raising it, it's not fraught with, there's no negative implication. No one's questioning anyone or suggesting anything negative. It really is just as a precaution, I suppose, because as I say, with mothers, it's pretty obvious. They know they've given birth to a child. And even if we've found a mother that, say we found a lady that has the same name, she will know if she's given birth or not. And so with fathers, it's obviously different. And so I think by us raising that as a very natural part of the process, it's not common that anyone would get defensive about it. Or if there are questions, we can answer those from our perspective, and it's coming from the perspective of people that are often involved in reunions, and it's just coming from themes and things over time. It's not coming from like any personal aspect. So
that's really interesting.
Hopefully that makes sense. But I know what you mean, because certainly DNA testing is also quite new. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but I think it used to be a lot more expensive. So it's much more accessible now. So even when I started working in this type of area, like we weren't doing it right back at the beginning. It's something that we've started recommending, because it's cheaper and easily accessible, and secondly, because we've had some of those negative things happen over time that we've thought we just want to do the right thing by everyone. When we're involved as the intermediary, we also sometimes actually facilitate the DNA test, which means, we might bring it up with both parties. And if they both say, yes, I want to do that, they can say no, obviously. If they say yes, we make some inquiries and we let them know what the cost will be. And often it's about $200 to $300 for a direct paternity test, or if it's with a sibling, like a child of the father, it can be a bit more, around 500. And usually people are absolutely fine with that. And often it's the person that's initiating the search that will pay, although sometimes the other party says, no, let's go 50-50. And basically we can get both parties' details, pass it on to the company, because the two parties might not be in direct contact yet. They might not be ready to meet yet, but they want to do the DNA first. So we would actually pass on that to the lab, and they would then post a kit to each person who would do the sample, send it back to the lab, and then the lab will actually send us the result, and then we'll contact both parties and talk that through with them.
Okay.
So, yeah, just thought I'd mention that. And I guess that's another advantage. And it's why some people might use the intermediary service when they're contacting a father more than they would contacting a mother, because there sometimes just is an added layer of complexity.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. And I can see how you acting as an intermediary in that process could just really make it a bit easier and a lot less stressful.
Yeah, I guess that's the aim of it.
So are there some other aspects of the intermediary process that are quite routine?
The first thing we would do if someone shows an interest in accessing that service is we'd explain how exactly that would look, and then they would have the choice if they want to proceed or not. Rachel mentioned the intermediary form quite extensively. She did a good job of describing that process. But for us, it is a process that, yes, we actually do have a physical form that I write answers to on that form, but it's really to facilitate a conversation with the person that's wanting to do the outreach. And there's a few key questions that is important for us to know as the intermediary, but also can actually be part of the preparation and the mental and emotional preparation. So we might let people know that obviously there's always a chance that the other party will say that they're not open to contact for whatever reason. And in that instance, I suppose we want to make the most, if that's going to be the only contact that happens, we want to know if the person seeking the outreach has any really important questions that they would like answers to, because that might be our only chance to get those answers. So there's some common themes that come up with that. Like often people really want to know about any relevant medical history. Or any family history, ethnicity, or just things about the family, about ancestors, or even about the person themselves, that they might not want contact, but they might be happy to say, oh, I've worked as an accountant and I like to play soccer. I'm just like making things up here. But those, when you know nothing about where you've come from, obviously those things are everything, can be everything. And for a parent,
just being able to get a small amount of information if you can't get everything you hoped for would be good.
And, if it's a parent wanting to contact a child, I suppose often they just want to know if their child is okay. And then anything else is good as well. Sometimes they want to know, do they have grandchildren, or just how is their child doing in life? So if we can at least get that for them, that's like, that's the bare minimum, I guess. And that's really can be very important to people.
And that health information you were talking about, I mean, how frustrating is it as an adopted person to go to a doctor and they say, and what's your family medical history with this? And you go, I don't know.
No idea. Exactly. And often
so to even have that.
Often at the time, the adoption happened, when people are young, like, most mothers and fathers were quite young in a lot of cases. You don't really, as a 20-year-old, you don't really necessarily have medical information to share because you're young and you haven't had any health problems yet. So often those things come up later in life, and I guess that's why it's an important question, because there might be things that are actually very important to know about. So I'm just thinking about
what if the outcome is a positive one?
So if the outcome's positive, another question we say is, if on the other hand they are really happy to have been contacted and they really want to get to know you, What are we allowed? Because we try to get people's permission with everything we do. What can we share with them in that first contact? And if it's a positive contact, we don't really want to tell them everything about the other person, because that's how you build a relationship, is sharing those bits directly.
Yes.
But
Yes.
sometimes they just would like a little bit too, because, they haven't known anything all these years, and they would just like a few little snippets straight up. So we just check with people, what are they happy to share? And that might be around, they're working in this kind of field, or they've got a family, or what some of their interests and hobbies are, just things that they think are important, to give that other person a sense that they are a real person, and that then they can get into more detail about those things over time. Let me think about the other important parts of that process.
Do you have like a discussion with the person who's seeking contact about what their expectations or what their hopes are when they're seeking to make that contact?
We do ask them about hopes. I guess, one aspect of that is for them to get in touch with, firstly, what are they most hoping for? In an ideal world, what would they really like to have happen? And then in a not so ideal world, if for whatever reason the other person is not open, what could they kind of live with? What could we try to get for them that would be something for them to take away? And and then obviously we sort of say to them, look, if the response is positive, the person that is conducting the search usually would be the person to write the first letter. Now,
the first letter.
I
feel like I need to go dum dum dum.
Yes. I mean, some people really don't want to write a letter, and they just say, look, can I just ring them? And if both people are happy with that, then we're not, not going to stand in their way. It's really what both people are comfortable with. But if one person is wanting to move a bit slower, then a letter is a very good place to start. Sometimes both people want to start slow. So, it might be a bit old-fashioned, but letters are quite nice, and you can send some photos, and photos are very helpful because not only can you see some resemblances, but again, the person becomes a real person, not kind of a fantasy. And it can take a while to let that sink in, I guess. That you're getting to know.
Sorry, Jane, go on.
No, that's okay. Go on.
I was just going to say, even just seeing somebody's handwriting for the first time.
Yes.
I can remember the first letter I had from my mother, and just seeing her handwriting. She had a beautiful script, and she'd written it on beautiful paper, and it really told me some things about her.
Yeah, because I think also the effort, that it takes you put a bit more effort into a letter than you do like a text message or a phone call. And the fact that someone has gone to that effort of writing and sending a photo, even if the other person is a little bit reluctant, sometimes they will say, look, I will receive the letter and then I'll decide. And by receiving that letter and knowing, I guess, that the other person really cares because they've really put a lot of thought into it, that can be quite meaningful. But it also can take away some fears that, they actually look really friendly. And by sharing things, they might actually realize, we've got some things in common. And they might actually open up a bit more than they would have just through maybe, when I talk to people, sometimes, as I say, they're very happy, but other times they're quite scared. And starting slowly is really, really important at times.
Yeah.
So, I think those are some of the key kind of aspects, I guess, of what we do with that service. Yeah.
So, Jane, we've almost skipped a step because we're talking about the first letter that the person who is doing the search would write to the person they're contacting if contact has been established. But we've kind of missed the part where you write the very first letter to make contact with that person. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, this is a very good question and a very good point. So after we've established, that the person wants to use the intermediary service and we've completed that intermediary form and we know where we all stand, Jigsaw would send a letter to the other party. Now, sometimes we actually have more than one address because there might be two men called John Smith, or 10 men named John Smith. Now, we never send more than 10 letters, but we might send 2 or 3 letters if we have no other way of distinguishing which one is the correct one.
Yeah.
So that's where we write a very general letter. So one of the reasons it's general is because someone might get it that's actually not the correct person. But the other reason it's general and doesn't mention adoption is because we are trying to protect that person's privacy. So someone else might open their mail and they might see this letter, and they may not know that there's an adoption in the family. So we say something like, we're looking for John Smith, who, might have been about 19 in 1971 and living in such and such an area. Please contact us, and we'd give our phone number. And, if we work part-time, we'd tell them which days we worked, because it's sometimes easier if they talk to the person that knows what's going on with the case.
Yes.
And we also say to them, look, even if you don't think you're the correct person, please call us, because it will help us to continue our search elsewhere.
Yes.
And we just say that we're helping someone with a family matter, and we try to make it clear that it's a genuine inquiry and not some kind of weird scam that people do get sometimes in the mail, particularly older people. I remember my grandma used to get weird letters, people wanting money, and it really freaks people out sometimes. So sometimes if we think the person's very elderly and maybe quite vulnerable, if we do have a phone number, we do have a little bit of discretion, and we would talk as a team about the particulars, and sometimes we would actually phone someone if we think a letter would be more distressing to them. But for the most part, we send a letter because we think a letter, particularly for mothers who are going to usually know as soon as they open that letter what it's about. It's sort of a bit more respectful because they can take their time. If someone else is home, they can decide when they want to call. Do they want to call when they've got someone there as support, or do they want to call alone because it's a private issue? So just gives them a bit more choice. Yeah,
sure. So what if they don't respond to that first letter? What happens then?
Yeah, so if they don't respond, we would give them a little bit of time, because obviously things can happen. People might be away, or, again, they might need a bit of time to process. So we do talk about that from the beginning with the person seeking contact, that, we are going to give them time, and that could be a month or it could be a bit more. Yeah. And then we would regroup. We would talk to that person about the options, and would maybe talk as a team if there's any complexity there, any ethical issues. But options would be potentially sending a second letter that we would then send registered person to person, so they need to sign for it, because that helps us identify, well, have they even got our letter? And we might acknowledge that we've sent a previous letter and that we really are keen to talk to them, and that we will very much respect whatever their wishes are, but we'd just really, really like to hear from them. And often that second letter is successful. If it's not, we would think about if there's any other options. Occasionally that might be a phone call, or it could be that we have exhausted our options, which obviously is never easy, but the person themselves still always has the option of sending a direct letter, because we as an organisation, I guess, have to be a little bit more careful about people's privacy, and we don't want to be harassing people. But sometimes people, even though there's a lot of advantages to using an intermediary service, the disadvantage is that some people might be actually a bit more skeptical of getting a letter from an organisation. They might actually think, is this some weird charity request? And they might disregard that letter. So if people feel that they just want to know that they have done everything in their power to reach out, they might write a more direct letter that actually says, this is about my adoption, or this is about my child, or this is about me being adopted, and I will respect your wishes, but I am looking for maybe some answers to some of my questions, and also I want to let you know maybe some information, like I'm okay, or something like that. And that would be a that would probably be a final step. And, obviously that's pretty hard if someone sends a letter like that and still doesn't get a response. But we just,
wouldn't it?
pretty awful, and hard not to know. But for a lot of people, it's important to know they've done their best, that they have done everything in their power to get that closure, and we would continue to support them emotionally, even if we have exhausted all of the practical avenues.
Yeah.
So
I have been on the sending end of two such outreaches, and they were responded to immediately. And we heard that Richard responded to Jigsaw's letter immediately. Is that often the case?
Yeah, again, I'd really love to have some stats on this. It's actually a little bit hard to say. Sometimes it feels like as a service we go through times when we're getting lots of positive outcomes and lots of positive responses, and other times when our letters might not be responded to. We kind of think, oh, what's going on here? So often we do hear back, and sometimes we don't. It's probably more often that we do than we don't. But, sometimes the adoption experience for whoever, whether it's a mother, father, adopted person, or we're actually hearing more and more from siblings now, siblings of an adopted person, because parents are getting a bit older. If you think of that peak era of adoption, and sometimes for siblings, there's less of that emotional fear because they're not as scared of rejection because they're coming at it from a different angle. Whereas for the adopted person themselves and for parents, there can be so much fear around, will I be rejected? But for the person receiving the letter, sometimes I guess people don't respond because they've had a very traumatic experience, and the way they've coped with that is to not think about it. And so the thought of having to talk about it is extremely confronting and provokes a lot of anxiety. So we do understand, when people don't respond to those letters.
It's really reassuring to hear how respectful you are of the people's feelings when you're making that contact.
And look, we do try to always keep the door open. If people call us and they're not ready for contact, of course we want to understand their experience and respect their feelings. And even if they're not ready for contact with the other party, they might be willing, if they feel safe with us, they might be willing to keep the door open. And even if that's like, look, can we just check in 6 months and actually see how you're going? Some people are happy for that, and they're happy to give it a lot more thought, but they do need sometimes an extended amount of time to come to that point. So we try not to ever close the door or think that it's final, because things change all the time, things happen, and
It must be really difficult when a person seeking contact isn't able to establish that contact or build a relationship with their family member.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard. It's hard not to know why. If someone's not responding, it's hard to know, is that because they don't want contact, or is it because something else is going on for them, or is it because of they haven't actually got the letter? So I guess that's where it's really great if we can at least understand that person's wishes. But even then, the grief and the pain of not being able to make a connection, I think, is something that then it becomes actually a lifelong grief and loss that has to be, like if someone's died almost, it has to be incorporated into that person's life. And I guess we just want to then try to support that person the best way we can.
And I mean, the adoption process itself can be very traumatic. So
exactly.
How do you find that impacts when you're trying to contact somebody?
I guess like the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is, I guess we don't want this to be a re-traumatizing experience, because we're professionals doing this. Like, I'm a social worker, and a lot of these people have dealt with social workers in the past that caused harm. So we actually want them to have a different experience and to have a lot more say and a lot more voice, and to feel safe with us, and to try to and I guess negotiate what both people need, which is often hard because both people, they might need different things. So it is tricky. And sometimes, so I'll just say sometimes we do refer people to more ongoing counselling if they are needing a lot more support. Obviously, we're always going to be there, but we might not have the resources as a service to kind of do that weekly contact someone might need to really get to the bottom of their feelings and really process that. But, you know, we're always there as a resource still.
So I guess I've been on the, like I said, the search side. So I've never had a birth parent trying to contact me. What might be some of the reasons that if a birth parent is trying to contact their child, that they might find resistance to that contact?
I guess for some adopted people, and it's hard, isn't it? Because we're all different. And as we've talked about, you know, in previous podcast episodes, for me as well, I was wanting to know where I'd come from. But for some people, for some adopted people, they have very much built their identity around their adoptive family, and actually feel a lot of connection with that family. They might be married, they might have children of their own, and they might be at a stage in their life where they actually just don't have a lot of room to add extra family members. That sounds quite awful to a parent that might be listening to this, but also, I guess in this stage, often the biological parents are a bit older, and the adopted person could be in that middle part of their life where they're very focused on career, focused on raising children. They might have elderly adoptive parents. There might be a lot going on that they just haven't really ever stopped to really reflect at that level, I guess, and feel that that's something that they're ready for. So, you know, I guess, again, we'd keep the door open and let them know that if they do have questions, if they do want contact, the other party's there. And similar to the other way around, I guess we try to support that parent. But obviously that's it really is. It's just a huge grief and a huge loss if you've already had that loss earlier, you know, losing a child, I guess, and then you try to reach out and you don't get a positive response. Then, you know, it's just awful.
Would it be right to say too that sometimes adopted people have sort of taken heed of all those societal messages around being grateful, and that it might be a betrayal if they were to meet with a biological parent? Is that something you come across?
A lot of people contact us actually after their adoptive parents have died, because they just have felt that, you're right, there's a lot of societal messages that we all hear all of the time, even now, around really you should be grateful for the family you've had, and they are your parents because they were there your whole life. But as we've talked about in the forced adoption episode, and as we'll keep talking about, that doesn't take into account some of the complexity and some of the things that have happened, and the fact that even if someone isn't with their child, they're still a parent to that child, and they still have a lot of feelings for that child. So yes, a lot of people contact us after losing their adoptive parents because they feel that they won't be hurting their feelings of their parents. So I guess that's where it is important. It'd be great for, hopefully, I'm hoping some adoptive parents will, you know, hear some of these episodes as well, and know that, you know, it's great if they can support their children to know that it doesn't have to be a threat to them, that there is actually enough room. Something I say to people, which has probably been said by different people over time, but you know, a parent can have more than one child and no one questions them on that love. And actually a child, you know, now we have step parents and all sorts of things. People can have more than one set of parents, and it doesn't detract from the other set. It's just different, and you can have different relationships. So if everyone can support each other as much as possible, I think, you know, that's the best case scenario. Yeah.
On a personal note with that, I know that my parents' supportive and understanding of me wanting to reach out and find my biological family. I guess made me love them more because they understood and they wanted to support me in something that was important to me. So I think there was never any competition in my mind. They were two separate entities, and there was plenty of love to go around.
I guess it's like that with a lot of things, isn't it? You kind of hope your parents will support like your choices in life, whether that's who you marry or what job you want to do. It's really nice. It's so comforting when you know your parents are on board with that. And
definitely.
I felt very great. I feel very grateful as well that that my parents supported me and were willing. Well, not willing. They wanted to meet my birth parents and to kind of go on that journey. And our relationship definitely evolved in a positive way after that. So, yeah.
So, Jane, in my career, I've had some real highlights, and sometimes things just come together and, you're fist pumping and you think that was awesome. What's it like for you in your role as an intermediary when positive contact is established between those two parties?
It's pretty awesome. And we definitely have some high fives in the office when we're in the office, not at the moment.
That's right. You're high punch in the air.
We might actually have to rethink the high fives now. I think of it in future, but yeah, it's really great, And actually, recently we had a situation with a father and a daughter having a positive reconnection, and the DNA lab that was involved actually sent me an email and said that even they were high-fiving at the DNA lab.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I think it's just, it's so good. It feels like, adoption is so complex and it can feel like a bit of a mess at times. And so when those positive pieces fall into place, it kind of feels like almost like we're writing a little bit of that overall adoption, some of the wrong things that have happened in the past, that we're putting people back together. But we also know that even if it's really, really positive, all relationships have complexity and they have good times and bad times. And it's actually then just the beginning once you get in contact. Yeah.
That's so right.
I think go ahead. No, go ahead.
The good fun of Skype. We need a minty so that we can virtually pass each other. I'm just thinking I've used this phrase, overused it. Probably people go, oh my God, I can't believe she's saying it again. But I always think that this process can be a bit like the Facebook status. It's complicated because it just is, but it doesn't mean it doesn't make your life infinitely richer.
Yeah, and I think it really does. Richer is a good way of putting it, I think. It's just deeper, more meaningful. And what else was I going to say on that? I guess just, for the times when there is a lot of fear, I guess it's knowing that it isn't always easy. So some of that fear is actually correct because it is scary. Yeah. But when you kind of move through that fear and establish contact, yes, it doesn't mean it will be easy, but most people are able to navigate that. There's some situations where people might truly not be in the right space and it actually might not be in their best interest to make contact, but probably more often than not, it actually can enhance people's mental health and it can be a really positive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, Jane, thanks so much for running through the intermediary process for us. This is a really well utilised service that can ensure that all parties have access to support with this very important part of their lives.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad we've talked about it because I think it's got a lot to offer, and it's up to people. But either way, to access support, I think can make a lot of difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, look, we'll say goodbye to you for now, Jane.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I'll remind listeners to take a look at our podcast notes page on the Jigsaw Queensland website for further information and resources. And I'll just let you know, Jane, that as you know, in our next, listeners and Jane, that in our next episode, we'll be having a conversation with Lois about a loss that her and I have both recently shared, and that's the death of our adoptive parents.
Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsawqueensland.com and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 210313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number, and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you are calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.